Hey, what's up guys, it's Talon. Today I'm going to be explaining the entire rune system to you guys. I'm going to go over everything, all of the new runes, how the rune system works, and I'm even going to explain to you guys how all of the old runes work as well, so that you guys can completely understand how every single rune in the game works, as well as how the rune system works. So basically the way that it works is that you have your keystone rune, which is going to be similar to the runes that we had previously, with you have like Airy, Electrocute, Phase Rush, etc. And we also have two new runes, which we'll get into later. After that, you then have a choice between 4 different characteristic sets. You have Domination, Precision, Resolve, and Inspiration. Once you choose these, you then have 3 subsets of runes to choose from. So whatever area or whatever tree you choose, for example Domination, you then have the choice between, for the first one, Scorch, Shield Bash, and Sudden Impact. The second one, these 3, and then the next one, these 3. And then after that, guys, once you choose whatever your main rune set is, you can choose another rune set to choose a single rune from. So you cannot choose Domination if you already had Domination as your main rune tree, and you cannot choose Precision if you have Precision as your main tree, etc. But if I choose Domination, then I can choose Precision, Resolve, or Inspiration as my essentially bonus rune that I receive. And the way this works is I can then choose any of the 9 runes from the first 3 rune subsets of the Precision tree to add as a bonus rune for me, in case, for example, I want Demolish, but Demolish is not part of Domination tree and I want to add Demolish or something like that. So moving on to now how the runes work, guys, I'm first going to explain the keystone runes. Okay guys, so starting off with Electrocute, which is one of the keystone runes. The way Electrocute works is if you hit an enemy champion with 3 basic attacks / abilities. So for example, you could do 3 basic attacks to trigger it, or you could do 3 abilities, or you could do 2 abilities, 1 basic attack. Any combination of abilities and basic attacks leading or adding up to 3 will allow you to proc it. Once you do proc it, you deal bonus damage to the target. And then Electrocute's going to be best on burst assassins who have really good ways of comboing abilities and auto attacks together. So for example, Jace has great ways of comboing quick abilities together to proc this. Zed has great ways as well. So if you're any champion who really wants a lot of burst damage and you also have good ways to proc it quickly, then Electrocute is going to be a great rune for you. Okay guys, so next up we have Airy. The way Airy works is that dealing damage to your opponent will send Airy to them. If you deal damage to them and send Airy to them, it will then deal bonus damage. However, if you shield your allies, then it will send a shield to them as well. You could also heal your ally. If you heal your ally or shield your ally, it will send them a bonus shield. So this is going to be very useful on champions who like to poke. For example, Varus likes to poke, so you can use this extra bonus damage to help you really snowball the early game. And then additionally, it's very good on enchanters who have shielding and healing, because of course if you shield your ally and then you get that bonus shield, it's just going to help them with the good survivability early game. This rune is not super strong in the late game, so if you are looking to increase your early game, that's really when it's going to be valuable. Next up we have Phase Rush, which procs the same way that Electrocute does, with abilities and a basic attacks up to 3. Once you use 3 abilities or basic attacks on someone, you gain both movement speed and also reduce the ability cooldowns of your basic abilities by 20%. This is very useful once again on champions who have easy ways to proc these. So if you can combo abilities and auto attacks very well together with your champion, it's going to be useful. But it's also of course going to be useful on champions who are very good at kiting or very much want to kite people. And then into matchups as well, such as a champion that you want to kite out. Like into Darius, it feels quite nice because you can use a combo on Darius and then run away before he's able to hook you. So situations like that, it's going to be very useful. After that, we have Conqueror. The way Conqueror works is that you gain stacks based on doing damage with either your abilities or your basic attacks. These stacks stack up to 6 times. Each stack will give you bonus AD as well as bonus AP, or rather it'll give you either based on your champion's damage type. And then once you fully stack it, you will get bonus Omnivamp, which is of course going to help you with lifesteal. This is best on champions who can stack it up quite easily. So again, Jace is a great example of a champion who can stack it really quickly, and then also great on champions who want to be in combat for a long period of time. So if your champion really likes going in and taking short trades, this is not going to be the rune for you. However, if your champion is a champion who really likes taking long extended trades, Conqueror is quite valuable in that aspect. Next we have Fleet Footwork. The way this works is moving, attacking, and casting abilities will all give you extra stacks. Once you reach 100 stacks, the next attack that you do will heal you, as well as increase your movement speed and restore your mana. This is best on champions who need that extra healing, or sustain or mana. So it's going to be really good in hard lane matchups where you don't think that you can win the lane and you need a bit of extra survivability. It's also going to be nice for kiting people out or being able to catch up to people using that extra movement speed. After that, we have Kraken Slayer. You gain stacks when hitting a champion, and basically once you get 3 stacks on someone, you gain bonus true damage. So this only works on auto attacks, meaning it's really valuable on champions who auto attack a lot. Once you get 3 auto attacks on someone, that's when you get that bonus true damage on your 3rd auto attack. So it's going to be great on champions like Lucian, who can auto attack really quickly and have a lot of auto attacks, or a champion like Renekton, who can use his empowered W to easily proc Kraken Slayer. After that, we have Grasp of the Undying. The way Grasp works is that every 3 seconds that you're in combat, the next attack that you do is enhanced, which will both deal more damage as well as permanently heal your or increase your health by 5, and then also heal you for a bit. So this is great in lane for almost any top lane champion or any champion that can maintain combat for a little bit. But yes, this is going to be very useful on champions like Fiora for really stomping lane, or Grasp or on Jax for surviving lane. But just in general is going to be a great laning rune. Next, we have Aftershock. It's a very straightforward rune. If you immobilize someone, then you gain defenses. And then after the defenses, after a little bit, it will end up popping, dealing damage around you. This is very good on champions with CC because, of course, immobilizing someone means that you have to stun them or root them or basically cause them to not be able to move. So a lot of tank supports and just tanks in general will really like this rune. For example, Alistar or Nautilus can really utilize this rune quite well to just gain that extra survivability. After that, we have Lethal Tempo. Lethal Tempo works similar to Conqueror, except it only stacks based on attacks, not on abilities. So after an auto attack, you gain a stack up to 6 stacks. Each stack gives you bonus attack speed, and of course, once you reach 6 stacks, you get the most attack speed that you can get from it. So this is going to be very useful on champions who auto attack frequently and who really can utilize attack speed well. Champions like Tristana, Jinx, and just many AD carries who auto attack are the best users of Lethal Tempo. Moving on to the first new rune, we have First Strike. The way this works is that you have to be the one to engage in combat first, meaning you have to deal the first amount of damage, whether it's an auto attack, ability, anything. Basically, you have to deal damage first before an opponent deals damage to you. Doing that will give you 5 gold, and then for the next 3 seconds, you will deal bonus damage to whoever you deal you first strike, basically. And then additionally, based on how much damage you do in those 3 seconds, you also get extra gold. So this is really good on champions who can start fights first. So Jace is a great champion who can use his long range to first get the damage on someone to trigger the first strike passive, and then can jump onto someone right after to end up utilizing that extra bonus damage. Lastly, we have Glacial Augment. The way this works is that if you land an attack on someone, you reduce their movement speed. And then if you impair someone, or immobilize them rather, then you end up causing these 3 rays to come out that basically come out from the person that you use that immobilization on. And then from that, there's this region that freezes people, which will both slow their movement speed as well as cause them to deal less damage. And then even when they leave that region, they'll be slowed for a bit longer. So TLDR, it basically, if you damage someone, then you slow them. This is of course going to be great for catching out immobile champions who don't have dashes or other ways to get out. And it's going to be great on champions who have a lot of CC because immobilizing someone will trigger that extra 3 glacial rays to radiate out from someone. Okay guys, so first we're going to go into the Domination tree. Then I will talk about every single tree and all of the runes inside of it. The Domination tree is really useful for burst damage champions, so it's going to be great on assassins, and it's just going to be great for getting a lot of early laning pressure in general. So if you're really just looking to increase your damage, especially your burst damage, this is going to be the rune tree for you. The first rune set in the Domination tree includes Scorch, Shield Bash, and Sudden Impact. Scorch basically just means when you damage people with abilities, you get bonus damage that burns them as magic damage. This is really good on poke champions like Varus, who like to use their abilities to just poke people down frequently. After that, we have Shield Bash, which basically is just after receiving healing or shielding, your next attack deals more damage. So this is going to be useful, of course, when you have enchanters on your team who can heal you or shield you, and then you can utilize that to really deal a lot of bonus damage to people. Lastly, we have Sudden Impact, which basically just means any type of dash that deals damage to people will then give you armor/magic penetration. So this is really good on mobile assassins who really want that extra burst damage while they dash onto someone. So a champion like Kassadin or a champion like Akali, after dashing onto someone, can utilize this extra magic/armor penetration to deal a lot of extra damage to people. Next up, guys, we have maybe the most complicated rune in all of the games. It's Empowered Attack. Every 10 seconds, it gives you an empowered attack. I know, pretty crazy, guys, but yes, Empowered Attack does indeed empower your attacks every 10 seconds. This is obviously just going to be useful for champions who want to empower their attacks. But realistically speaking, just any champion who's going to auto a decent amount, who wants the extra burst damage, especially in the early laning phase, is going to utilize this quite well. After that, we have Cheap Shot, which basically just deals extra damage to people who are impaired. So if you're a champion with CC who also likes to deal damage, then this is going to be quite useful for you. And then the last one we have here is Mark of the Week. Basically, if you use an ability and deal damage to someone, it'll mark them, and it increases the amount of damage that they will take. So this is going to be very useful on champions who are great at poking. So Varus would be a great user of this, or any champion that has good poke, because after you initially poke them, then they'll take a lot more bonus damage. So it's also going to be great on champions who are able to follow up well on damage. So say you're, again, Jace, who you poke someone initially, and then right after you jump on them. It's going to be great because not only are you poking them and applying that mark, but right after you have a lot of follow-up damage to really take advantage of the fact that they take more damage after getting marked. Moving on to the third Domination rune set. First, we have Eyeball Collector. This gives you some bonus AD/AP after a unique champion takedown, stacking up to 10 times. In my opinion, this rune is quite weak because 0.5 AD and 1 AP per takedown, meaning per kill/assist, is very, very small. So I honestly don't recommend this rune on anyone. But if you're a champion who gets a ton of kills, if you're playing an assassin or something, perhaps it could be useful for scaling up into the late game. Next up, we have Ingenious Hunter, guys. And basically, this gives you 20 item ability haste and then gains a 4 item ability haste after each unique takedown. So the way this works is basically any champion or any items with certain passives, like a Guardian Angel passive, for example, will get reduced by this ability haste. So it's like ability haste for items, as the name clearly explains. So again, if you're a champion who builds things like Guardian Angel or Protector's Vow or things with unique passives that have long cooldowns, then this can be quite a good rune for you. And then lastly, guys, I think this is the most OP rune in these three sets. So like for Eyeball Collector, Ingenious Hunter, and Zombie Ward, I would say you're pretty much always going to want to choose Zombie Ward. Basically, the way it works, guys, is that after removing an enemy ward, it spawns a zombie ward in that place, and it grants vision for 120 seconds. Additionally, every time that you utilize this zombie ward passive, you get 2 AD or 4 AP, stacking up to 5 times. So this is just going to be really good on champions who want to take sweepers. So junglers and supports are the most commonly champions to take sweeper. So if you're playing either of those two roles, I would highly recommend taking Zombie Ward, or really any chance you have, because this rune is freaking insane. Moving on to the second tree, guys, we have the Precision tree. Now this tree is going to be quite useful for damage, similar to the Domination tree, but it's more long-term damage and less initial burst damage. So it's going to be really good for champions who do like to stay in combat for longer. So if your champion generally likes to fight often and fight for long periods of time, this is going to be a great rune tree for you. In the first rune set, we have Brutal, Triumph, and Gathering Storm. The way Brutal works is basic attacks simply deal bonus damage. It's very straightforward. If you're a champion who has a good amount of bonus or just a good amount of auto attacks, then you're going to want to use this. Now, it does do really, really poorly in the later parts of the game, so it's really about snowballing the early game for this rune. So if you're not an aggressive early game champion, I do not recommend going this. But again, if you auto attack a lot in the early game, this can be a good rune for you. After that, we have Triumph. Champion takedowns meaning kills or assists, restore 10% of lost health and 10% of maximum mana and energy. So this is going to be quite useful on champions who like to basically get a kill and then keep going and keep going. So if you're any type of champion with like a reset, like a Darius, or just any champion who in general likes to stay in combat for a long time, it's going to be quite useful, because if you get that one kill, you can get those resets on that health and just keep surviving and getting that extra mana and everything, and just basically being in the fight for a very long period of time. So it's just really good for snowballing fights in general. And then the last rune that we have in the first Precision rune set is Gathering Storm. Gathering Storm, just basically every 3 minutes you gain either AD or AP depending on your champion's damage type. And this is going to be very useful for scaling champions. Of course, it's quite weak in the early game, but on scaling mages like Orianna, Ziggs, you're going to get a lot of bonus damage by the later parts of the game. So if you're able to stall the game out to 18, 20, 25 minutes, you can really just 1v9 in the late game team fights. Moving on to the second Precision rune set, we have Last Stand. When your health is lower than 60%, you'll deal bonus damage. And then when your health's below 30%, you deal even more bonus damage. So basically, just the lower you are, the more damage you deal. This is going to be useful on champions who like to stay in combat for long times and really like to fight well low. So Olaf is one example I could think of that would use this so well. Imagine the lifesteal plus the being low health. You would be able to kill anyone even when you're really low health. but it's just in general, any champ with a decent amount of HP who likes to be fighting while low health is going to use this really well. After that, we have Giant Slayer, and this rune is really OP in certain situations and completely useless in others. It deals bonus damage based on people's bonus health. So if you're into champions who build a lot of health, like a Mundo, like an Ornn, anyone who's stacking a bunch of health, this is a completely OP rune that nobody usually utilizes, but it's just going to be super useful. But of course, if you're into a lot of squishy champions, you're never going to want to run this rune, so it's super situational, and you're definitely going to want to pay attention to basically how many tanks they have and how many bruisers they have to decide whether or not to take this rune. And then the last precision rune in the second set of runes is Coup de Grace. When an enemy champion has low health, then you'll deal more damage, so less than 40% health, you deal more damage. So it's essentially the opposite of Last Stand, where Last Stand is when you're low health, you deal more damage. Coup de Grace is when they're low, you deal more damage. So this is going to be really good for one-shotting people when you're an assassin or something. So I'd imagine a champion like Zed, or just any burst assassin, would quite like this rune for just one-shotting an opponent. Moving on to the third rune set in the precision tree, we have the legend runes. The way legend runes work is if you take down monsters, enemy champions, or minions, then you gain some type of stat. For legend alacrity, you gain attack speed. For legend tenacity, you gain both tenacity and slow resistance. And for bloodline, you gain omnivamp, which is just lifesteal. And so for each of these runes, I think that they suck, honestly. I've never been a fan of runes that take so long to stack up, and one of my friends, Shyster Nick, he was telling me that it takes about 15 minutes to fully stack these runes, so getting value out of these is going to be quite hard. But the situations where alacrity is going to be the one that you want to choose is, of course, when your champion auto attacks a lot, because that attack speed is going to be useful for you, especially in the late game. Tenacity is, of course, going to be useful into champions with a lot of slows / CC, so if you're into just any type of tanks or anyone with a lot of CC, it's going to be the one that you're going to want to choose. And then Bloodline is just going to be useful into poke champions, because when they poke you down and then you're able to lifesteal that back up, their poke becomes much less useful. I especially like this rune on just any type of marksman or ADC. Once again, I don't like legend runes, but if you do go with the precision tree, those are going to be when you're going to want to choose those various runes. Okay guys, moving on to the third rune tree, we have Resolve. The value in Resolve, of course, comes from the survivability. This is essentially the rune set for defensive stuff. So if you either are a squishy champion who's very scared of assassins in certain games, or you're a tanky champion who wants to increase their survivability, this is going to be the rune set for you. Okay guys, so moving on to the first rune set in the Resolve tree, we have Font of Life, Courage of the Colossus, and Nullifying Orb. The way Font of Life works is if you hit an enemy champion with an attack or ability, it will mark them. Once you mark them, either you or your allies can attack that enemy, and then if you trigger that by attacking them, you will then heal yourself and your allies. So this is going to be useful on any type of support that wants to use this to just get some bonus healing for themselves and their team. So I would say it'd be decent on Nami, from what I can think. It'd be good on Braum, those types of champions. Of course, Font of Life used to be a keystone rune, so it's going to be a bit different now that it's just simply just a minor rune. After that, we have Courage of the Colossus. The way this works is that you get a shield after dealing, or rather after immobilizing an opponent. So if you stun them or root them or anything like that, you will then gain that shield. So this is going to be useful on champions, of course, with immobilization abilities. So a champion like Nautilus or Leona can utilize this quite well to just get a bit of extra survivability when they CC someone and go in. After that, we have Nullifying Orb, which just means if you take damage from someone that causes you to fall below 35% HP, so basically if you take damage that gets you low, then you get a shield. So this is going to be very useful against assassins, especially as a squishy champion. So for example, if you're an ADC and you take the Resolve tree, Nullifying Orb is going to help you avoid death from champions like Zed or Kali, who are very scary and could one-shot you. So anytime that you feel that you may get one-shot, this is going to be the rune that you're going to want to choose. Moving on to the second rune set in the Resolve tree, we have Second Wind. Basically, the way Second Wind works is you gain 5 health every 5 seconds, and then also, after taking damage, you regenerate some extra HP. So the way, or the times that this is valuable is into poke champions, because you get that frequent healing every time you take damage. So if you're in a lane matchup that's difficult and you want to survive it, or if you're into just like a lot of poke like Jace, Ezreal, Varus, etc., that's really going to be when you want to take Second Wind. Loyalty, in my opinion, sucks, but As a support champion, you could potentially take it if you really want to protect your teammate. Basically, the way it works is you gain 2 armor and 5 magic resist, and then the person closest to you gains 5 armor and 2 magic resist. So again, this is only really useful on supports when you really want to protect someone, but just because of the fact that the other 2 runes are so much more valuable here, I would really not recommend this in nearly any situation. Lastly, we have bone blading. This is going to be really good comboing with nullifying orb, because the way it works is after taking damage from someone, the damage that you just took, as well as the next 3 abilities or attacks that are damage to you, you'll basically get a shield making them deal less damage. And the reason this is so valuable is because if, say, a Zed or any assassin ults onto you or does a lot of damage to you in a quick burst, you prevent a lot of that initial burst. So again, into burst champions who take trades with multiple different combos and abilities, that's when this is going to be really useful. And once again, this is going to be super useful as a complete counter to assassins taking bone plating plus nullifying orb. It's going to be very, very difficult for them to kill you if you're like an 80 carry, for example. And then moving on to the third and final rune set in the resolve tree. First, we have Overgrowth. The way this works is when 2 minions or a monster either are killed nearby, then you will gain some HP, a very small amount, and then your max health can forever, it can be increased. There's no limit to it. However, once you reach 30 stacks, you gain 3.5% bonus health. So this is going to be useful for scaling and for champions who really utilize health well. So I would say on to tank champions and supports and junglers, just tanks in general. If you really want that extra late game survivability, it's going to be useful. Now, it's not going to help you much in the early game, so if you're looking to win in the early game, I would not recommend this. But again, if you want to be really, really tanky in the late game, that's when Overgrowth is going to be the rune for you. Revitalize is very simple. Your shields or healing that you do to allies will be increased with this rune. 5% normally and 10% when your ally is really low. So this is of course only useful on champions who can heal or shield, so a lot of enchanter supports are namely the most obvious ones that you would want to use Revitalize on. Lastly, we have Perseverance, and you gain 10% tenacity as well as some armor and magic resistance whenever you get immobilized. So this is going to be useful into champions who have obviously ways to immobilize you, so into a lot of CC like Nautilus, etc. If there's those types of champions and you want that extra survivability when they dive on top of you, that's when Perseverance is going to be the most useful rune to grab in this last rune set. And finally, guys, we have the Inspiration Tree. This is essentially the miscellaneous tree is how I would label it. There's just a bunch of random stuff in here, whatever cool things you could think about. It's a lot more fun. There's more random things. There's cool things. There's just a lot of like generally useful things that aren't related to the obvious stats like damage or like survivability. So this is going to be a very creative rune set. It's going to be one where if you don't really feel there's much value in these certain rune sets, or you just want to be more creative and play the game just with a bit more fun, then this is going to be the rune set for you. So going in, guys, first off we have Sweet Tooth. So this one is pretty straightforward. We already know it. It increases honey fruits healing, and then it also gives you some extra gold simply when you get the honey fruit. So this is useful especially on champions who want to survive the lane, because the honey fruit is going to be useful for you in that sense. So if you're a weak early game champion, it's going to be helpful. And then additionally, a champion who utilizes gold well, so I could think of a lot of 80 carries, for example, or just scaling champions in general, where Sweet Tooth can be quite valuable. Now, arguably the coolest rune added in this patch is Hextech Flash Traption, which is basically just Hex Flash is what everyone's going to call it. And so what this does is it replaces your flash when your flash is already used, and it allows you to blink to a location after channeling for 3 seconds. So basically you get a flash, but you're really, really slow for 3 seconds while it's channeling. This can be super, super useful, especially on tank champions or on junglers who want to gank. Basically, it's going to allow you to do creative things, to get out of situations, to go over walls, and just going to allow you to surprise a lot of people if you use it, for example, in a bush or something and they can't see you. So yeah, in general, this rune is going to be really good for engaged champions and for junglers. Next up, guys, we have item crafting, aka Orin passive. Basically, you can buy an extra item every 3 minutes, but it costs 150 extra gold. So unlike Orin passive, it costs extra gold. But basically, you can, be in lane farming or whatever, and then, oh, you have your Trinity Force? Well, buy Trinity Force right now instead, but it's just going to cost you a bit extra gold. So this is going to help you stay for longer in fights, or like say the dragon's about to spawn and you don't want it back, but you want that item. It's going to help in those situations. I feel it's not going to be the most valuable rune. I wouldn't probably recommend taking this very often, but if you are a type of person who feels they struggle with backing at the correct times, this can kind of be a cheat code for that. Moving on to the second rune set in the inspiration tree, we have Transcendence. What this does is very simple. It just gives you ability haste based on level. So the higher level you get, the more ability haste you're going to get. Ability haste just reduces the cooldown of your abilities. So it can be very valuable on champions who use abilities and have long cooldowns on abilities. A champion like Ashe, for example, really wants it to reduce the cooldown of some of her long cooldowns, like her third ability as well as her ultimate. So in general, going to be useful on champions who utilize abilities. After that, we have Futures Market. The way this works is you can purchase items on credit, and you get about 145 gold that you can use on credit. So basically what this means is, say you have 400 gold, but you want to buy a 500 gold item. You can buy that 500 gold item, but you go negative 100 gold. So if you have this and you don't have enough gold, you can buy it, but you don't actually get free gold. It's just next time you back, like, you're obviously not gonna, you're gonna be negative that gold, so you have to farm that gold up to get back. So it's gonna be useful for champions who really want to play around power spikes of items. So if you're like a Trinity Force buyer, which is quite an expensive item, or if you're like a lot of AD carries who really value items heavily, this could be somewhat useful for you. I don't feel like it's going to be the best rune. I feel like it's not going to be super useful, but those are the cases where you'll want to use it when you do have the expensive items and you want to play around your item power spikes. And then we have Pathfinder, guys. Basically, you just gain movement speed in the river, and then you also restore some missing health or mana, depending on what's lower, when you're in the river. And so this is going to be really useful for roaming champions who are in the river a lot, namely supports and junglers. So of course, supports are often in the river when they're roaming. So if you're a roaming support like a Nautilus or like a Leona who wants to be impacting the entire map, it's going to be quite useful for you. Or if you're a jungler, it's going to allow you to get across the jungle quicker and just gank people easily. So really, junglers and supports, especially roaming supports, are going to be the only people who will really want to take this rune in most cases. Next up, we have Nimbus Cloak, one of my favorite runes of all time. And the way this works is after using any summoner spell, you gain movement speed based on the cooldown of that summoner spell. So Flash has a long cooldown, so you get more movement speed. Ignite has a shorter cooldown, so you get less movement speed. And this is really valuable on champions who don't have natural mobility. So if you're a champion who doesn't have a lot of dashes or doesn't have a lot of ways to get out, but you want that extra survivability, you can simply ignite your opponent and then run away from them, or flash away and then get out really quickly. Or you can use it in the opposite direction where you end up chasing people and catching up to them because of this extra movement speed. In general, I think this rune is really, really strong, and I do recommend going it when you can. Next up, we have Demolish, and this rune is going to be especially useful on split pushers, of course. Split pushers obviously want to take towers very quickly, and it does exactly that. So basically, when you're close to a turret, you gain charges on the turret, and then once you get 6 charges, your next attack will damage the turret with more damage. And there's kind of an indicator, like there's like these 6 little marks that you can see on the turret when it's activating. So that's how you can kind of tell once those like stacks fall off. Once again, split pushers are going to utilize this well. Lane dominant champions can utilize this to get early turret plates. So for example, if you're a champion who you know, say you're even playing Thresh, for example, and you know your lane matchup is really, really good for you, and you can win this lane matchup very hard, you can expect to probably be able to take a turret plate or two when you have Demolish, so you can take it in those situations. And then lastly, ganking junglers also like to take this, because if you're ganking often after a successful gank, you can stay for a little bit and get some extra turret plates. And the final rune of the video that we have here, guys, is Mana Flow Band. Simply hitting an enemy champion with an ability or empowered attack will increase your mana permanently by 30, and then it's max 300 mana. So very simply, this is going to be useful on champions who struggle with mana. If you ever find yourself running out of mana very commonly on your champion, 1, I would recommend trying to just manage your mana better, but 2, if you feel like your champion is just very heavy on mana, like a Varus, like a Jace, Mana Flow Band can be very, very useful for that. So yeah, guys, that's going to be it for the video. Honestly, like, this was kind of rough for me. I tried recording this video one time. I didn't like how I did it, even after taking like an hour to record it or so. So then I recorded it again, and then the audio was messed up. So then I recorded it a 3rd time, which I liked, but then my video deleted itself randomly. But then I restarted my laptop and the video was back, so at least there. You know, it only took 3 tries, but eventually we got the video. It did take a bit of effort, and it was a bit frustrating to record, so if you guys don't mind, if you could like it, that would be very helpful, of course. Let me know what you guys think about the runes. I want to know what you're going to be putting on your favorite champions, so if you know whatever your main champions are, I'm curious to see what you guys think are going to be the best rune combos for them. I'm going to be sharing various rune combos for some of my favorite champions. I think I'll have a Jace video coming out soon. I'll probably just play a game with him and show the runes and stuff there. Probably gonna try making some YouTube shorts on some of the builds, perhaps. That might be interesting to do. So I'm definitely interested in doing some of that stuff, starting the YouTube shorts and making content about these runes and about item choices and rune choices for various champions. If you guys have other video ideas, let me know in the comments below. I really hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys later.